Hello, hello, hello. I'm going to be doing video today regarding a response to a question that I received on actually one of my videos, and it was actually the video was Council of Gods Part 2.4, El the Bull, Eloah, and Elohim. Now, the question or the comment started out as simply stating ancient Hebrew didn't have vowels. Um, so I found that odd because I do believe I've addressed that in some other videos, but I knew that this individual had a line of reasoning to play out. So I went ahead and I responded to the comment, and I said, correct. There were no markings for the vowels, but they did speak the vowels. They knew the vowels by the context and by learning from their teachers. It is the same in Israel today. All the newspapers print Hebrew without vowel markings. And the comment that I got after that went like this: IMO, which stands for in my opinion, it's functionally impossible to actually determine what, if any, difference in pronunciation might have existed as Hebrew scripts don't adopt the vowel system. They have now until sometime in the early Middle Ages. Given what we know about how languages change over time, regardless of liturgical traditions associated with them, it is unlikely that we could ever actually determine this type of statement to be either true or false. Most scholars of ancient Hebrew and Canaanite languages agree that the closer you get to the point of derivation from Canaanite to Hebrew, they functionally become impossible to distinguish. Hebrew is simply the Canaanite language in a quote-unquote post-Canaanite society. It is a similar case to how we guess that Yahweh, that is Yud He Wah is pronounced Yahweh, but we actually do not know for sure. This is simply the modern best guess. It could just as easily have been Yowo, Yewa, Yahweh, etc. I would assume that it was pronounced El, as Melchizedek in the Bible is depicted as priest of El, and this isn't treated as a different god, but instead he has a long ancient tradition of revering El against the overwhelming dominance of Baal Hadad's cult, having pushed El to a status similar to Kronos in the Greek pantheon, given that at the point which the Canaanites existed as a unique society and the Hebrew began concatenation, the, uh, the languages were the same, it seems unlikely they would have had much, if any, variation. Okay. Um, so, what I wanted to do was go through that comment and kind of just talk about it because I think it's very important. Um, the reason being, let me switch back to the video. The reason being is that I clean my glasses. Um, it's very hard for me to distinguish at times if somebody is giving me a comment in support of what I am saying or if they're actually commenting against what I'm saying. Um, And in this case, it does seem to be that there is a mixture of a little bit of um, critical mindset thrown in the mix here. And I wanted to address the comment line by line and just kind of discuss it. Um, you know what? I realize this is live, so let me see if I can see if there's a chat window open. Um, okay, so I'll be checking the chat window every so often to see if anyone's there, but primarily this is just a video of me commenting on this other comment. So let's look at the first part here. In my humble opinion, it is functionally impossible to actually determine what, if any, difference in pronunciation might have existed, as Hebrew scripts didn't adopt the vowel system they have now until sometime in the Middle Ages. Okay. Okay, and I believe I have addressed this, and that I've stated that all we have to go by is what the scribes, the rabbis, gave us in about the 2nd or the 3rd century A.D. in regard to the vowel markings for the Hebrew. Now, certainly, the vowel sounds existed prior to the markings of the Hebrew. Now, the question of did those vowels change over a period of time? Possibly. Did the vowels differ from locality to locality? Probably. But did the vowel sounds exist at all? Yes, they did. They did exist. And one of the points that I make in some of the upcoming videos is that there's a reason for each character in the Hebrew. Now, some of those characters that I talk about in the Ugaritic are actually more of characters that are representative of vowel sounds, whereas in the Hebrew, the characters are there are only a handful of characters representative of the vowel sounds, and so the majority of all the characters are consonant characters. Now, is it functionally impossible to actually determine what, if any, difference of pronunciation might have existed? You know what? I'm gonna have to rewatch this whole video eventually, but I've seen it a few different times, and the comment, I believe. Well, let's move on. What he says here. Given what we know about how languages change over time, regardless of liturgical traditions associated with them, it is unlikely that we could ever actually determine this type of statement to be either true or false. Okay, which statement are they referring to? Are they referring to the statement, the preceding? Most scholars of ancient Hebrew and Canaanite languages agree. Okay, let's just go with what he said after that. Most scholars of ancient Hebrew and Canaanite languages agree that the closer you get to the point of derivation from Canaanite to Hebrew, they functionally become impossible to distinguish. Okay, let me just stop right there. Okay, in regard to this statement, okay, where he says the point of derivation from the Canaanite to the Hebrew. This is a mainstream idea. It is a modern idea in which Canaanite language precedes Hebraic language, or what we term Hebraic language. Certainly, it can be a case of semantics when we get into these discussions, when we start saying that, when we start discussing things like Proto-Canaanite, or the fact that possibly the early Hebrews spoke this language, is one thing, okay? But when we start discussing and crossing over into the areas of cultural differences, then we need to draw more of a line in the sand. I think that the practice, more or less, of equating languages with one another, and then thereby equating cultures with one another, is the typical approach in this arena, or in this field of scholarship. So again, let's look at what he says here. He says, most scholars of ancient Hebrew and Canaanite languages agree that the closer you get to the point of derivation from Canaanite to Hebrew, they functionally become impossible to distinguish. Okay, note the automatic assumption that Hebrew is derived from quote unquote Canaanite, okay, or what is termed Canaanite. Because then again, what we're calling Canaanite, it's just a name, okay? We're getting into semantics. But what I'm talking about here is the fact that there have been studies in regard to, and I talk about this in my other videos, that in the case of, like, let's say Ugaritic, that Hebrew could very well have pre-existed the Ugaritic language. Okay, now that's just one other, what we'll term Canaanite culture, that used cuneiform, a cuneiform alphabet. But in that regard, there is that idea that Ugarit, the Ugaritic language, pre-existed the Hebrew/Canaanite languages. And again, yes, do all the languages have commonalities? Of course they do. Of course they do. They all have commonalities. All right, now let's move on to the next sentence here. It says Hebrew is simply the Canaanite language in a quote-unquote post-Canaanite society. Okay, and there you have it right there. What I want to see is, well, it sounds like I'm picking up, this microphone's so sensitive. I'm picking up other voices. At any rate, what I wanted to see was somebody to show me, through more of a, or I'm going to take these headphones off because I can hear those other voices in my headphones. Show me the point at which Hebrew is derived from quote unquote Canaanite. You can't really do it. I mean, you can do a lot of speculating, and you can like throw books together and paragraphs such as this, and just keep saying the same things over and over, but it doesn't make it true. The fact is that it is still a speculation that that the Canaanite culture was the precursor to the Hebraic culture. Um, in fact, what could just as likely be the case is that they developed parallel to each other. Um, from what we see in our in the Bible, is that the Canaanites were descended from uh, Ham, while the Semites were descended from Shem. And so, despite the modern day designations of Canaanite for all cultures that have similar Semitic languages, when we're talking about the actual family lineage and like the actual familial line, the descendants are from Ham, the Hamites, and so we have a little bit of confusion there in that regard, and so again, then it gets down to this question of what we're calling it. We're calling all Canaanites Semite, and were they all from the same familial line? Yes, because ultimately Shem and Ham, their father, they have the same father. So, which was Noah. So the point of the matter is that this whole obsessive focus on the Canaanite culture preceding the Hebraic culture is more propaganda, in my opinion, than it is fact. It's speculation. It's typical of modern biblical scholarship, where they continue to, keep parroting the last generation, for the last 100 years, and yet, as we continue to study the matter, we continue to speculate that indeed the what we're calling the Proto-Canaanite language, or could very well be the pre-Hebraic language idea. And again, that those languages were similar to each other, does not necessarily have to link suddenly the cultural aspects of each separate nation or each separate peoples. And certainly, did they speak more than one language in their day? They all did. They all spoke each other's languages. In I'm sure there were translators, and there were people that just had to learn the languages to speak with their neighbors. And so, yeah, there were all similarities in the languages. And but to then actually, just start off with the assumption that that Hebrew is simply the Canaanite language in a post, quote unquote, post Canaanite society. Did the Hebrews, or shall we say the family of Abram, did they live amongst the Canaanites? Did they intermarry with the Canaanites? Sure. Was there trade? Yes. But when it came to their ideas about their god or their gods in the case of the Canaanites, um, the descendants of Abraham were very specific in that regard. And so what we see, though, is that prior to Abraham leaving Haran and journeying to the land, what we see is that prior to that is that Noah, and prior to Noah, we see again a monotheism in the familial line. So anyway, let's move on to the next sentence where he says, it is a similar case to how we guess that, you know what, let me check the feed. I don't even know if, oh, here we go. We got somebody talking. Okay, BB. Live chat. Okay. He says, I think the Bible is a partial truth, and the Bible is made by the government to keep us boxed into a reality with limits and stop us from reaching our full potential as human beings. BB. Okay. Typical. That's a typical. I guess that's a typical response of modern day scholarship. Let me see what else he says here. Manipulation of the human body, DNA, and advanced knowledge of the human body has been documented in history in carvings, drawings, tables in Egypt, Greece, China, Japan, etc., different time periods. We are made in God's image through the manipulation of the human body DNA with God's DNA intertwining us, so it makes us God and are able to obtain the universe endless unlimited potential energy. Believe in yourself and the laws of the universe. We are God, and through believing in all of this, you will be able to reach your full potential as human beings and able to obtain the universe endless and unlimited potential energy. BB. Okay, well, at least I got somebody commenting, whether or not I agree with them or not. But yeah, I would say no. We are not all little gods in the sense that, in that sense, no, we all are. Certainly, we have a spark of divinity, but there is only one God, and are we to believe in ourselves? Well, we are to believe in ourselves to the extent that we need to believe in God. And in that sense, that where our belief in God leads us to believe in ourselves, because we are humble enough to admit that we are in need of God. So I would have to say that. All right, now getting back to the question or the comment that I had received, it is a similar case to how we guess that Yud-He Wah-He is pronounced Yahweh, but we actually do not know for sure. This is simply modern best guess. Could have easily just been Yowo, Yahweh, Yahweh, etc. Okay. And I cover this in another one of my videos, and hopefully upcoming, down the line, sometime in the distant future, I will do a video on the Vav versus the Wa. But right now, I'm still pretty consumed with the Council of the Gods idea and currently working on my exhaustive study of the Hebrew word El in the scriptures. So hopefully I'll be able to finish that before the end of this year. Of course, I think I said that last year. And so continuing to live my life and try to study these things at the same time. But of course, I favor the Vav uh, character rather than the Wa character, like the Wa pronunciation of the Vav, or rather the whole controversy surrounding the Vav and the Wa. I do favor the Vav. Um, I can't back it up at this time, but still working on an exhaustive video series on that. Now, we would agree on this point that you don't know what the vowels would have been. Of course, we know what the vowel pointings meant at the time of the time that the markings were given, in the 2nd or 3rd century. We know what those vowel sounds stood for, and we can trust that for a significant amount of time prior to the 2nd century AD, that those were indeed the vowel sounds that were used. How far back can we trust it? I don't know. But, the point of the matter being is that, yeah, when you get so far, you wonder what those sounds were. But the Jewish tradition has always been not to even pronounce the name at all over the years, over the centuries, for fear of pronouncing it incorrectly. So in that case, we are always using other words to replace the sacred name, such as Lord or Adonai or Hashem. So in that case, we regard the name as sacred by not pronouncing it at all. So perhaps the knowledge of the vowels was not really meant to be known anyway. So this comment overall that was given on my video doesn't seem to be questions per se, but a lot of statements, some of which I agree with and some of which I do not. The next sentence states, I would assume that it was pronounced L. Now, this individual is stating that the term L, and I don't know if he's jumping from the title Yahweh or Yud-He Vav-He, and let me check my my feed again, because I think BB may have posted something else here. BB says, what the Bible does to you is keep you boxed into a reality with limits and stop us from expanding our mind and have outside the box thinking. I'm a couple years, this is BB talking in his comments here. I'm a couple years away from getting my ancient history bachelor's scholars degree, and you cannot discount and discard all the documented evidence from our past. Well, let me just say on the first comment that BB has made here that the Bible, in my opinion, and also in my belief, I'll say it in my belief and in my faith, the Bible is a representation of that which is eternal. In fact, you cannot contain the Word of God within a book because it pre-existed all of creation. And the Word is what creation was made through. God spoke and everything was created. The Bible is not something that keeps one in a box, but it is something which imparts freedom and glory. The same glory that hovered over the creation in the beginning is the same glory that is represented in the pages of the Bible. that same glory, the knowledge of God, is what imparts wisdom and frees one's mind to uh, basically love God, love one's neighbor, and in thereby doing, we fulfill all righteousness. Um, so, in that regard, I would disagree. Now, and again, I say this by faith. I fully admit that this is a stance in faith, and I have other reasons to speculate why I believe in the Bible, and I continue to post those, and I'm sure I'll be posting these videos for the rest of my life. But that's the way it goes. You're never going to convince the world. Only God, by His Spirit, by His glory, can reach out and touch an individual. And so, BB also said that he's a couple years away of getting his ancient history and BA scholars degree. I would like to just congratulate BB in his pursuit of knowledge, because I think, yes, it's good that we go to school, that we get our degrees, and that we're constantly seeking truth. Um, and the whole thing about that I cannot discount and discard all the documented evidence from our past. Well, I would say, what evidence? I mean, I've done a lot of studying in regard to what many would call evidence. What I term as mostly speculation, um, and we're just making general, broad statements here about a lot of different things. And when it comes to modern biblical scholarship, it's not about it's not about faith in God and faith in the Bible. Modern biblical scholarship is about shunning the Bible. It's about saying everything opposite of the Bible. And why would anybody think to call that biblical scholarship? That's not biblical scholarship. That's those are ideas against biblical scholarship. So anyway, getting back to the question on my previous video, the commenter had stated, I would assume that it was pronounced L as Melchizedek, and then what he's basically saying is the same as Melchizedek pronounced in the Bible, which is in the book of Genesis, in which he was priest of the Most High God. But it sounds like this person is equating the title, or I should say, the title L with the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, but I won't speculate on that. It's kind of hard to follow this commenting here, but when they say they would assume that it was pronounced El as Melchizedek in the Bible depicted the priest of El, and this isn't treated as a different god. And in this regard, I would agree with the person here. His name is the Evolver 311. I would agree with him in that he says that it isn't treated as a different god in the context. In fact, the name Yahweh and the title El Elyon are in reference to one and the same Lord. So, yes, I would agree with that. And then when they said instead he has a long ancient tradition of revering El against the overwhelming dominance of Baal Hadad's cult, having pushed El to a status similar to Kronos in the Greek pantheon. So this is again where the modern biblical scholarship has creeped into the ideas of a lot of conservative Christians, conservative Jews. When they go to school, modern biblical scholarship begins to feed these ideas in regard to these ancient traditions regarding revering El against overwhelming dominance of Baal Hadad's cult, having pushed El to a status similar to Kronos in the Greek pantheon. That again is most likely speculation. In the case of the Ugaritic cultists, we see that there seems to be this lesser prominence given to their god Il, where they're saying that Baal is triumphant and takes the leadership role, and that Il is the grandfather figure, so to speak. So basically, yeah, that's a whole different concept, and the whole idea that is a speculation of Melchizedek the priest, revering El more than Baal Hadad, when actually you could just say that Melchizedek was revering Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who happens to have another title of the Most High God, because this gets into equating the title El Elyon with the Ugaritic title Il, okay, which, by the way, in the Ugaritic religious text, you'll never find the term Most High God with regard to Il. You'll see that there is a variation on the term Most High, which is Baal, where they say Baali, where they use the term Ali, which is more akin to the Hebrew Supreme One, but not the same, and not equating the Hebrew title Elyon. But that was in regard to Baal, and it was only used in one paragraph twice in a poetic form, in regard to Baal as the Supreme One, but never in regard to Il. So the only reasons that people they run around and they say, oh, El is the same as the Canaanite god Il. In fact, there's so much equating of the Hebrew god El as Il that they just say El, and they just say El, and when they translate the Ugaritic text, they put the word El, they put the title El in regard to the Canaanite god Il, and they just make the assumption that this is the same El, when it's not. It's not the same El, and in Hebrew, it's only a title that means God. It's not like the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, so it's definitely a title. And so let's look at the sentence again, which states, I would assume that is pronounced El, as Melchizedek in the Bible is depicted as a priest of El, and this isn't treated as a different god, but instead he has a long ancient tradition of revering El against the overwhelming dominance of Baal Hadad's cult, having pushed El to a status similar to Kronos in the Greek pantheon. So essentially that just makes the assumption that the descendants of Abraham somehow viewed El and Il as the same. When we look at the context, we don't see that. Actually, what modern biblical scholarship does is they take a look at other Canaanite texts, such as the Ugaritic text, and they say that is representative of what the Hebrews believed. instead of actually looking at the Hebrew text to seeing what the Hebrews believed. In fact, what modern biblical Hebrew does, modern biblical scholarship, is they continually say the opposite of what the Bible says, and they will continually question what the Bible says, and they will continually speculate as to what the actual true history of the Bible was. When year after year after year, since the Middle Ages, I could say that, the Bible has continually proved itself through archaeology and continues to prove itself. So let me take a look at my feed again here and see if we've got some more comments going. All I have is one commenter, but I have to thank that commenter, because without that commenter, I would have nobody talking on my live feed tonight. So thank you, BB, for commenting. Let's see what we got here. BB says, documented evidence in the past in different areas of the world with the same evidence and thesis of same conclusions. Explain to me how that is possible and what are the chances. Also read about the pineal gland and its effects on the government's mainstream toothpaste and the ingredients it has inside to slow down the plaque up our pineal gland that is located in the center of our brain. Well, in regard to the first comment, it says documented evidence in the past in different areas of the world with the same evidence, thesis of the same conclusions. Explain to me how that is possible and what are the chances. I think I'm going to need specifics. Maybe one specific thing. It's kind of generic. But the other question regarding the pineal gland and its effect on the government's mainstream toothpaste, certainly I don't know what, I think this has something to do with energies in the body and cleansing the body, which I'm a big advocate of, by the way. And I've been trying to, I've been on a really quest for health in the last, probably 4 years or more lately. And so, yes, definitely, I want to stay away from fluoride, and I want to stay away from city water. So I've gotten my own water system here at home that I utilize, and it takes out all the fluoride, takes out all the lead, all that stuff. Then my water is filtered a second time in the kitchen by a reverse osmosis system. So that's good. And even after that, I'm still getting water, buying water for drinking primarily. And the water in the kitchen is sort of like, that's good for maybe tea or boiling potatoes, or but I try not to drink too much of that water because there's not a lot of minerals in it. There's actually nothing. It's zero minerals, zero anything in it. But so in that case, I feel okay washing with it because I know there's no fluoride, there's no chlorine, fluorine, or any of that other stuff, which I grew up with. And so, yeah, I do believe that the fluoride was very detrimental to my own body over the years. So I do stay away from that. He's saying manipulation of the human body, DNA, advanced knowledge of the human body, photons that related to the chakra energy system and also is related to the tree of life, all talked about in our past. So yeah, that's sort of a new agey idea that I don't get really into that stuff, but that's a teaching that a lot of people are going by, is this tree of life, that our body, Basically, tree of life for the Orthodox Christian, Orthodox Jewish mindset. We don't think too much about what it was, um, but basically, from a Messianic Christian perspective, the tree of life, essentially, the life is again God's word. The word that preexisted all of creation, the word that spoke creation into being. That same word within us, through Messiah, Yeshua, that word, uh, is what gives life. And that is the tree of life. So that's how I would look at that. And so getting back to the other question, or actually the comment, in regard to El and this whole thing about Baal and how the modern scholars just continue to equate uh, the Canaanite Il, or rather El, with the Hebraic Il, or I should say Hebraic El. um, yeah, you have to be careful what those kinds of ideas that's slipped into your education that are speculation. And so the comment goes on to state that here, given that at the point in which the Canaanites existed as a unique society and the Hebrew began concatenation of the languages were the same, it seems unlikely that they would have had much, if any, variation. So it sounds like the word concatenation, by the way, it just means taking one concept and then adding it to another. Like in Excel, when you concatenate two things, you're saying like cell A1 and cell B2, and then the result in C3 will be both whatever's in A1 and B2. So if you had the word blue and then you had the word pants, and then the result would be blue pants. Okay, so that's concatenation. That's just a basic idea of what concatenation is. So the individual's talking about the concatenation of languages and taking like the Canaanite language and the Hebrew language and meshing them together. And did that happen? Certainly there were cases where that happened. But then we get into the whole thing about equating language with cultural ideas and religious ideas, when those are two separate topics actually, and the Hebraic ideas about God, um, are completely opposed to the Canaanite ideas about polytheism, gods. Okay. Were there times when there was polytheism amongst the Hebrews? Yes. But from the beginning of the biblical record, we see a monotheistic God. We see that it was God who created the heavens and the earth. And I get into a whole series about the title Elohim, and we continue to talk about that. Because a lot of people love to jump in on that and say, well, that's that's the gods, that's the plurality. But no, it's not. So anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But basically, that tends to be what it always comes back to, is this thing about language and the intense focus of the modern scholars to equate languages with cultures. And of course, culture is one thing. For instance, I live here in Southern California, and my culture here in Southern California is much different than, let's say, the culture in Houston, Texas. Okay. Do we both speak English? Yes, we both speak English. Um, but the culture here in Southern California is very different from the culture in Houston, Texas. Okay, that's just a modern day example. What I'm saying is that the languages can be similar, yes. Even the dialects, like you could say that certain things were dialects. Um, but it always comes back to this speculations that are accepted, they are accepted as fact, building upon generation of modern scholarship, wherein they never question the prior generation's scholarship. And when you go back far enough, you see that it's totally unfounded. There's nothing holding up the speculation. Some guy guessed that maybe was the case X number of years ago, and then they just keep saying it over and over again year after year. A lot of the same things going on in modern day politics nowadays, like as far as like fake news and all this other stuff going on. But let's see if we have any more comments from BB. BB said they had all this advanced knowledge when we are only figuring things out now with advanced technology today and in our past decades. One of the main points I'm trying to share with you is always be open-minded on everything and have an out-of-the-box thinking so you can keep expanding your mind to what our God Creator intended us to be at our full potential. Okay, an open mind is one thing. And I have studied a vast number of different ideas over the years. But I'd have to say that you get to a point in your truth seeking where if something comes up that would evoke you to go in and study something else, that's what it would take. It would have to take something that where you're seeing something, there is some divinity that is guiding you toward a truth. You just keep seeking that truth, and I pray that, yourself, as you go along your path of seeking your truth, that you would find yourself ultimately with the God of the universe, and placing more glory upon the Creator, who created us, rather than what I have come to know as the world, typically having a focus more on us, more on, our abilities, more on everything about what we are capable of. And are we capable of great things? Yes, we are capable of great things and great potential if we humble ourselves to the Creator. So I think it's a difference of focus, and that is where we would differ in our beliefs in that respect. And BB says, I do believe there is a God and a higher power, but not exactly what is portrayed in the Bible. And, and that was obvious, that I could see that, from your comments. And so I think a lot of people, they reject the God of the Bible because, personally, the God of the Bible is really not portrayed in a manner that he really is by those that do not believe in the Bible, that those who want to downplay the Bible. if, and this is my personal belief, that if somebody is down about the Bible and they're down about the God of the Bible, then they really don't understand correctly, because if some people are like, oh, the God of the Bible is vicious, he's a murderer, he's this, he's that, he's not any of that. And personally, what you're going to find is that the God who reveals himself through nature is the same God who reveals himself in the Bible. Um, and so all this other naysaying about, the God of the Bible is, monstrous and a monster and all, it's just all fake news. It's all propaganda. Um, and 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 so BB says, I do believe that the Bible is a partial truth. And I think a lot of people are there, like they see a partial truth. Well, you can see a partial truth in everything, right? Um, you could see a partial truth in almost every religious book on earth. And of course, myself, as a Messianic believer and a believer in the Jewish scriptures and a believer in the New Testament, uh, I, you know, I believe wholeheartedly in the Bible as the full truth. In fact, I believe so much in that word as pre-existent before the creation of the world that you really can't contain all of the truth in that book. But it is representative of it, and it's like you read it over and over again, and it just keeps unlayering truth after truth year after year, no matter how many times you read it. So I do believe that those who wrote it were inspired by the same spirit that created the universe, and that anything that we would look at as possible mistakes or things that do not work out, that the more we look at those things, the more we can explain them. And that's what I have found over the years as I have studied those, and why I continue to do videos to defend those things and talk about each thing. But each thing needs to be taken as a separate point. I mean, obviously, not everyone is interested in long, boring videos about defending the Bible, but I am. And BB said there is more evidence of the manipulation of the human body DNA and etc. in our past than the Bible. Well, I guess that's all a point of view. Certainly, and it's interesting because I'm not sure what you're referring to as regard the manipulation, but it sounds like something to do with ancient alien ideas, or I mean, if I was getting into more of even more speculation in the Christian groups in regard to DNA manipulation of the giants, and like the Nephilim or something of that nature. But I think from your point of view, you're coming in at more of a astrology and more like esoteric. So you're probably leaning more to this kind of ancient aliens idea, or like them manipulating our DNA or something like that. But I would have to disagree with that idea. And as far as our DNA being manipulated, like, I'm sure that our DNA is going through changes. I mean, I think what I've even read is that we can actually affect our DNA for the better by the foods that we eat. Because if we're not eating good, then obviously the DNA that is prone to sickness and disease is going to kick in, and those DNA sequences are going to be activated for like cancer or something of that nature. But we could have the ability to shut those off through eating right and through prayer, as far as what, like the way I would look at it, the way I would believe about it. And as far as like um, more evidence for the manipulation of the human body DNA than evidence for the Bible. Um, and that really goes into how much you study a topic, because like if you're just totally studying the topic of DNA manipulation and you're consuming yourself with it, you're going to see a lot there. And I could say the same thing about the Bible. If you just really focused in and studied a lot about um, the Bible and how it has lined up with archaeological finds historically, even though we can say that we could date like maybe the Dead Sea Scrolls to some portions of it to 250 AD, maybe 108. 250 BC, 100 BC. What is contained in those pages represent a history that goes back, to the creation, that is passed down from generation to generation. And what we keep finding is that the words in that account continue to be verified over and over again. And all the times that that the naysayers continue to say that there's no evidence of this, there's no evidence of that. Sometimes there's been cases where it's taken 50 years or 100 years, but archaeology catches up with the fact that certain civilizations existed. For instance, for many years, the naysayers were saying there were never any Hittites. The Hittites never existed, and they just said it over and over again. No, the Hittites never existed. But of course, eventually they found evidence of the Hittite culture. And then let's see what BB says. BB says, this is a theory of mine and a few of my colleagues I work with. When you believe that God in general is the only one capable of anything, then you are implementing the impossible in your mindset, feeding into that from reaching our full potential and advanced quantum level. Okay, there's a lot of assumptions in that, and one of them is that we're all moving forward, that we're advancing, that we're evolving, and the idea of evolution. Aside from the idea of God, okay, now we're just getting into this whole thing about assuming that we're all progressing. I mean, there is this fantasy that we have all been fed since we were young about Star Trek, The Next Generation, and beings that evolve into a state of energy, and like that's the real spirituality. We're all going to evolve into just a state of energy, and that is somehow outside of the idea of God. That this is ultimately the real course of mankind. But everything we keep seeing over and over again is civilizations rising, civilizations falling, humanity going down into the depths of depravity. We continue to get sicker and sicker as each 100 years goes by. I don't see things getting better. I see them getting worse. And with everything that they're talking about as far as advancements, everything is going back to what is the simplest, especially in regards to diet and gardening, organic gardening, and the fact that we're finding out that even if you grow tomatoes in greenhouses, those tomatoes are less nutritious than the tomatoes that you grow out in the sun, outside of a greenhouse. We're pushing forward all this technology to grow more and more food, and we're making it worse and worse. what it when it needs to just go back to what it was originally. And that's what we need to do. We need to go back to what we were originally. We need to go back to the Garden of Eden, is the way I look at it philosophically and through faith. And BB says, so you implement that impossible mindset on a quantum level our that's stunting our growth and expansion of mind. Well, that's fine. I mean, people can believe these things. Certainly, are we all in this together? We are all in this together. But you know what? It's up to each one of us. It's up to each one of us to turn to God. And ultimately, there's going to be a resistance toward God. There's going to be a resistance toward the traditional. And that's what is in our culture right now. It's a resistance to all things traditional. If it was traditionally the Bible, they resist that. If it was traditionally a patriarchal society, they resist that. If it's traditionally conservative, they resist that. Everything about modern scholarship is a proclamation of a resistance or a rebellion. Okay, in effect, saying we are the ones in the right. It's not those old ways. No, it is the modern way that is correct. And it is what is termed modernism. And modernism is so entrenched in our culture, so permeates our school systems, so permeates our entertainment industry, and every aspect of our culture. We're all swimming in it. And anyway, it says, BB says, okay, I'm going to ask you a question right now, and I need you to be honest. What if the future you were to find out that the Bible isn't portrayed what it is and faked? How would you feel and how would you react? Well, I guess I'll have to wait till I get to that future. For instance, I don't have really a lot to lose by believing that God is real. In my sense, I don't see how believing in a loving God and doing good things and believing that the word of God is completely true, how that affects society and makes it a worse place. Now, modern scholarship is ready to go out there and parade and carry the flag of religion is bad and religion is the cause of all evil in society. And, of course, mankind is going to rebel against God and against what he deems as righteous, because man is against God. Most of mankind is against God, and our ideas are against God. And what we consider natural, we're like, oh, it's natural. It's perfectly natural. Yeah, everything is perfectly natural, but is it right? That's the whole thing. And we get down to a matter of right and wrong. And, we're just talking generalities here. I'm just talking generalities. We're not getting into specifics here, but I can be more free-flowing and I can talk quicker about generalities than I can about specifics. If I talked about specifics, I would probably trip up over my words and I wouldn't know what to say. But right now, I'm just letting a free flow of thought go here. And essentially, yeah, religion is the enemy, in modern society, especially the Bible. Christianity is the ultimate evil. And of course, Islam is looked at as, kind of intolerant as well. But for some reason, Christianity is worse than Islam or something of that nature. Yeah, let me go back to my other question here, which it wasn't a question, a comment on my last video. They had said that given that the point in which Canaanite existed as a unique society, and the Hebrews began concatenation of the languages, were the same, it seems unlikely that they would have had much, if any, variation. Okay, I think I answered that whole thing. Um, let's see. BB is also asking another question on the feed. BB says, but would you accept the fact that if in the future you were able to find the Bible isn't entirely portrayed and that it's fake, would you and could you accept the fact? I'm curious. I'm not afraid of the truth, okay? If the truth leads me to wherever it leads me, it leads me. But the difference is that there's faith in truth, and then there's knowledge of truth, okay? And the whole thing about this world is they're like, show it to me. Show me the facts, show me the beef, where's the beef? And the whole thing is you have to conceive of everything in your mind. Everything has to be understood up here. Now, I am not one to discount the virtue of logic. In fact, I spend hours and hours and hours going over reasons why I believe and I speculate that certain things are true. But ultimately, I have faith in those things that they are true. Because really, truth is truth. You accept it as truth or you don't. And that is what it has been always from the beginning. One person stands on one side and says, this is truth. And the other person stands on the other side and says, no, you're wrong. This is truth. And it will always be that way until the consummation of time, until this all comes to a fruition, until the world is finally glorified, until the knowledge of the Lord is spread throughout the entire earth, and that everyone knows the Lord. Teaching at that point, teaching will be obsolete. Because everyone will know the Lord. This is what the Bible says. So basically, if I were to come to the point where I were to say, first of all, there is a certain thing in the question, and that is that how can you know anything for truth? Ultimately, you can come to some very good arguments, and that's why a lot of people don't believe in God, because logically they cannot believe in God, or they cannot believe that the Bible is totally true, based on certain contradictions that somebody pointed out to them. But ultimately, what is it that we as a creature, if we're supposed to be these insignificant creatures that are barely and I know that you probably don't hold this view because you talk about the vast potential that we have, but some people hold the view that we are merely nothing. We are like a speck of, not even a speck of sand in this vast universe, and that who are we? And with that kind of an idea, why would our thoughts be able to comprehend anything, to understand anything at all? But going back to the question, no, I am not afraid of truth. And the thing is that I don't see that I would ever drop my faith. Of course, none of us knows our future, but I would say this: truth, ultimately, I place a great deal of faith in, and that's why I have the name Truth Seeker. And then BB's saying, yes, I'm not telling you to stop believing your faith and disregard everything. I just asked you that question to prove that your way of thinking is boxed into reality and not able to expand your mind. Have to be out of the box thinking, but no offense or disrespect toward you in general, any offensive way. None, no offense taken. I think that uh, the whole thing about having your thinking inside of a box, that's not, like I said, it's a matter of perspective. I mean, you have your ideas about you know uh, potential quantum potential, or I could only guess that that means that we'll evolve into some sort of an energy state and godlike quality or something of that nature. But um, you have those ideas of your own, and you have your reasons. You have your reasons for speculating that way, and ultimately, beyond speculation is belief. Okay, and belief puts you into a worldview, and I don't deny that, and I really, I never deny any of that. I think that when I talk about modern scholarship, I think that I talk about a general atmosphere in education, in biblical studies, that really puts their own selves in a box. Because for them, it's always about how the Bible's not correct. And so they're not ever seeing outside that possibility that maybe it is correct in this regard. Maybe on that one point it is correct. Because this is how they fall into a lot of their um, later on we find out through archaeology that certain civilizations did exist, and they're busy parading around and saying, see, the Bible's not true, blah blah blah. uh, so yeah, I mean, you say you restrict yourself into a box. Well, yeah, yes. uh, I would agree according to your worldview, yes. But according to my worldview, no. I am seeing the world through the eyes of my own faith, and so that's just how it is. That's just how it is, and I pray that others would believe that I would, as I believe. You know, only the Lord could work within the hearts of others. And BB says, for example, if you were to keep people in a limited area for their whole life, how would you expect them to learn anything else than other their limits? For me, this is so funny because from my area of life, it's all about what we term the satanic if. And the satanic if is always questioning. It's always saying, if this, if that, what if this, what if that? Um, so that's just a point on the side, okay? But essentially, I believe that God is a fair God. So despite the fact of any people being in some area, I don't believe that ultimately they're going to make wrong choices based on their limited amount of information. Um, we all are born where we're supposed to be born. We're all born in the time we're supposed to be born in. We're all right where we're supposed to be. And we continue to pray that the Lord move us into different areas and move us into the areas that we're supposed to be in. Again, you're getting back to the focus of learning, where I feel like that's more of a knowledge-based learning, like a gnosis, Gnostic idea. It's like, if only we have the gnosis, the knowledge, then we have our salvation through knowledge. We have our salvation through the secret knowledge, which I tend to disagree with that focus. A lot of times that's a lot of semantics, and it doesn't, maybe in sometimes we're saying the same thing, but the focus, the focus to me is, the Lord. The focus to me is the Lord. And at any rate, yeah. So I think, what time is it? It's 10 o'clock. I think I need to wrap things up. I want to thank you for being a part of this discussion. And come back anytime. God bless you, and much blessings and peace to you, BB. And have a good evening, everyone. Good night.